there. My name is Margaret Harvey, and I'm going to read something that I had written on my blog. First time writing on my blog, my first blog in a long time, and I thought I would share it to this format, which is new to me. But anyway, for anyone who may be interested. This is called Responding to State Media, and it's responding to the CBC, and I'll just read it, and if you want to find it, I'm sure you can find it, CBC News, Ontario School Board Trustee Investigation, and I wanted to respond to this. I'll just read it, and you can come to your own conclusions. Well, it's been a long time. Not sure how long exactly. Feel free to tell me. I stopped or almost stopped writing on this blog because I found it so incredibly painful. And I still find it painful reflecting on divisive topics within my own culture. It's easier when you have a sense of distance, another time, another place. But when it's your own, when it's where you live, it's so incredibly hard. When it's people you know and you find yourself thinking that you'd rather be somewhere else rather than addressing these issues. And so I stopped, or almost completely stopped writing on this blog a number of years ago. I felt like I had said what I needed to say at the time, and I let myself move on to other interests and other concerns. Add to that, I found it very hard addressing two extremely controversial areas all at once, two painful histories, being the history of the far left and Islam and its encounter with the West. But as I have found myself saying recently, it's like we become, or can become, strong at the broken places. Coming from a background of verbal abuse, maybe I can take more than the average person, but it's still hard. And I am still a very sensitive person by nature. But lately, I've been thinking, while knowing that there probably would come a time when I would return to this, my first blog, Building Spaces, Building Bridges. I knew it because I've always known in the back of my mind that that is where my heart is. Namely, I've always had a heart for those outside the church. I've always wanted to communicate something to them, perhaps as someone who doesn't really come from a Christian background myself, not in a consistently practicing sense, and having found something, a sense of meaning and purpose within the church. I've always wanted to try to bridge that gap, to communicate as a Christian across secular and other non-Christian spaces. So here I am. So what brought me here this morning? We just had an election in my home city, and I read an article from a CBC journalist, and I thought, you can wait all your life to do things, right? I'm going to keep it simple because I'm also learning that if you think and rethink everything you say, as I've tended to do on this blog, it's going to be a long time contributing to ongoing public discussions. I don't have all the answers. I know that. I know it very well. But I also see that there aren't a lot of people in these discussions who are trying to be fair to both sides or to consider both sides. And I honestly think I'm one of those people who seem to be in a minority. I have no interest in demonizing people who disagree with me. My heart in all of this is for ministry. That's why I went back to school at 40, after being out of school for almost 20 years, to go to seminary. I'm not running for office. I'm not seeking power in any earthly sense. What I want to do at the end of the day is to minister to people where they're at. Just where they're at. So you can take my thoughts or leave my thoughts. What I see in the following article is that this writer does not seem to have the concept that religious minorities have the right to disagree with him. If I'm wrong, feel free to show me from the article why you think that I'm wrong about this. Be my guest. And this is what I see coming from the far left. You can say the same thing about the far right if you like, but represented in what is supposed to be public broadcasting here, funded by taxpayers, including religious minorities, and is supposed to represent and presumably support all Canadians, not just the far left, not just the left, not just the mainstream left, but all Canadians. And it's not just him. This was what I see from these movements as a whole. There is a lack of acknowledgement that religious minorities have the right to be religious minorities, whether it is conservative Christians or Muslims or Jews or Hindus or minorities of conscience generally. They have the right to say, we cannot agree with this for reasons of conscience. And that should be respected. Such minorities have the right to say, we do not want our children instructed in this. And we want to know if that is what is happening, because we want the right to remove our children as we deem appropriate. Speaking personally, and this is from my heart, when my children were little, as a theologically conservative Christian, I did not opt to send my children to a private Christian school. For one, I didn't think I could afford it, like most parents. But secondly, I wanted my children to learn to be in the world but not of the world. To be compassionate people, to learn to work with and to love people that we might disagree with. I said from the time they were little, we may not agree with everybody, but we love people. And I've always tried to teach my children that. We may not agree with everybody, but we try to love people. We try to see the person inside. And anyway, so my conclusion, my honest question, as a theologically conservative Christian who is willing to give reasonable accommodation to other minorities, including sexual minorities, for the record. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but in principle, I'm willing to accommodate people who disagree with me, and I'm willing to try to meet them halfway. I would ask them the same question, though. Are they willing to give religious minorities reasonable accommodation when we disagree on controversial issues? And I would ask them to think about that, and I would ask the CBC to think about ways that they can give more fair and balanced coverage to these issues, with an understanding that it's not just one side, it's not just one group that's represented in these discussions. There's sexual minorities, and there's also the issue of rights of conscience and the rights of religious minorities. And I just ask you to think about that. Thank you.